Hey guys, Frosty Knives here, back with episode 4. Not the episode 4, but my episode 4 of Frosty's EU reviews in chronological order. And that brings us to James Luceno's second novel that we're reading, Cloak of Deception, a political thriller. We've had a prison thriller, and now we're getting a political thriller. So this really is the story of two pairs of people. The first pair is Qui-Gon Jinn and his Padawan, Obi-Wan Kenobi. And Qui-Gon is investigating Captain Cole and the Nebula Front. And the Nebula Front is a group of terrorists, freelancers, freedom fighters, mercenaries, depending on who you ask, are an organization that is making trouble for the Trade Federation. They don't like the Trade Federation. They don't like the monopoly. They don't like what the Trade Federation is doing in the Outer Rim. So they're trying to make life for the Trade Federation as miserable as they can by attacking ships, stealing cargoes, running interference, basically trying to destabilize the Trade Federation. And Qui-Gon is investigating. He's chasing Captain Cole because he wants to find the Nebula Front's headquarters, and he wants to somehow find a resolution to this conflict to stop the Nebula Front from running interference and doing what it's doing. And he's bringing Obi-Wan along for the ride because it's his Padawan, and here we go, we're getting a mission. The second group of people that it focuses on is the Supreme Chancellor Valorum and Senator Palpatine, and the relationship that the two have. As Valorum is trying to navigate the Senate, he's trying to pass a taxation bill. He's getting a lot of pushback from senators and planets for that. So he's asking for advice from Senator Palpatine on how to navigate that. And as the story goes on, he also has to weather not one, but two assassination attempts orchestrated by the Nebula Front. So we see how the two stories are sort of intertwining. And he's really relying on Palpatine to help him through all of this, through the taxation law that he's trying to pass, and through the attempts on his life from the Nebula Front, and all of the things that are assailing him from all sides. That is the gist of the novel. So let's talk about what I liked about the novel, what I not so much liked about the novel. Because this really is, in my opinion, a middle-of-the-road Star Wars novel. So one of the things that I liked about the novel is the relationship between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and we get to see a mission that Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan go on prior to Phantom Menace. Now, it's no secret, I am not the world's biggest Qui-Gon Jinn fan. I really never really liked the character in the movie, and I don't really like... I'm not super excited to read about Qui-Gon. Not that I think he's an unnecessary character. I understand his role. There was nothing that in Qui-Gon's character that really struck me. He always felt to me as generic Jedi number 12 in the movie. And in this book, he still feels like generic Jedi number 12 in the book. So I'm not the world's biggest Qui-Gon fan. That being said, it was nice to see the interaction between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan as the two of them go on this mission with the Nebula Front. Obi-Wan getting to do Padawan things, and Qui-Gon getting to do master things, as Qui-Gon is trying to teach Obi-Wan his philosophy of the Force. Because his philosophy of the Force is very different from the Jedi Council's philosophy of the Force. Qui-Gon really believes in what he calls the living Force, which is you live in the moment, you live in the present, you use the Force to find out what's going on right now in the present. And the Jedi Council believe in the unifying Force, things in the future, the Force helping you to figure out what's going to happen in the future. If you do something now, how is it going to ripple through through future events? And Qui-Gon is more like, no, you got to live in the present. You got to use the living Force right now. The only thing that matters is right now, not the past, not the future, but here. And that's what labeled Qui-Gon a renegade. That's why you hear in this book and you hear in other books that, if only Qui-Gon had followed the same philosophy as the Jedi Masters, that he would have a place on the council. But because he doesn't, because he differs in his opinion, because he has a different philosophy of the Force and he's a renegade, that's what's keeping him off the council. And that's when you begin to realize that the Jedi Council, they don't want free thinkers. They want sheep. They want other Jedi who think like they do. That's when you begin to see the corruption in the Jedi Council. Because they don't want free thinkers. They don't want people like Qui-Gon who's gonna, well, maybe your way isn't the right way. Maybe this way is the right way. Maybe in this situation, this way is the way to go. And they don't want that. So you begin to see those kind of rifts happening. And it's neat to see other philosophies, because we're going to see a lot of that down the road. There's a lot of Jedi who have a lot of opinions and a lot of philosophy on what they think the Force is and how the Force should be used and what the Force is really for. And here's one example. The difference between the living Force and the unifying Force. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed seeing a mission with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, because we know the next mission that they go on, the Phantom Menace mission, that ain't going to end so well for Qui-Gon. We know how that ends. So it was nice to see that. I did enjoy that, even though I think Qui-Gon is generic Jedi number 12. One of the other things that I also liked was the relationship between Senator Palpatine and Supreme Chancellor Valorum. This book is really good on showing the relationships with people, and I enjoyed that. We didn't get a lot of backstory on Valorum, but it was nice to see the relationship that Valorum and Palpatine had, because we know where Palpatine is coming from, and Valorum does not. Valorum in this book, it was a wonderful character arc. It's a good some backstory. He really is a decent politician. He really does want to bring peace to the Republic. He really does want to do good by the people. But he's just so manipulated by Palpatine. So completely manipulated. And he's so oblivious to that manipulation. He's so unawares of all of the positions that Palpatine is putting him in. And he says over and over again that I trust Palpatine, that all of the other senators, they tell me what, they want me to hear. They tell me these lies and whatnot, but Palpatine is the only senator who's honest, who tells me the truth, who tells me how things really are. And it almost sounds like Valorum considers them besties, that we're besties. And that if I had other senators as honest as Palpatine, then my job would be easier. He's so oblivious. And of course, Palpatine is here manipulating everything. Manipulating the Trade Federation. Manipulating the Nebula Front. Behind the assassination and stuff. He's manipulating all of this because he's trying to make Valorum look like a weak leader in the eyes of everyone, so that he can force a vote of no confidence and have him ruled out of power, so that leaves the role vacant for Senator Palpatine to step into the role. So it was good to see that, but you really felt bad. I felt bad for Valorum, because you know how this is going to end, and he's just so oblivious. And I also felt bad for the Trade Federation, because they don't want any of this either. They're not warriors. The Nemoidians are not warriors. They're Ferengi. They're business people. They're commerce people. They don't want this. And you hear Newt Gunray talking in this book and in other books about how he doesn't want to do this, how He doesn't want an army. He doesn't want to start a war. He doesn't want to have a droid army. He doesn't want to be that person. He doesn't want to catapult the galaxy into eternal war, but he does. But they do. They go along with Sidious's plans, and they just don't want to. They just want money. They just want to be rich. They're just business people. And Sidious is like, I tell you all the time, those are served best by those who serve me. And so you will do what I say. And I honestly think that it didn't matter for the Nemoidians. They were screwed either way. They were screwed either way because the way that it actually happened, they were boxed into a corner and they were manipulated into doing the war. And so that was the tragic end to them. But even if Newt Gunray had shown a spine and said, no, I'm not going to do this, and stood up to Sidious, or even from the start said, no, I don't want to do this, it's probably likely that Newt Gunray would have suffered a tragic accident. And then somebody else would have been in his place, somebody more amenable to the Dark Lord's wishes. So either way, the Nemoidians were screwed. They were just pawns in a galactic game. So I like seeing all of that. The other thing I also like seeing was the Jedi. You get to see the Jedi Council in this book. All the other Jedi members, you get to see Mace Windu and Yoda and Yaddle and Plo Koon and Ki-Adi-Mundi and Adi Gallia. They all have big roles. You get to see how they make decisions or don't make decisions, how they sit around and just talk about things instead of actually doing things. There's a lot of bureaucracy in the Jedi Council, and you get to see that, and you go, wow, you're supposed to be, guardians of peace and justice, yet you sit in this tower, literally, you sit in this tower, and you just talk, and you say, we shouldn't get involved. We should not get involved. Jedi don't get involved in politics. Jedi don't get involved in internal conflicts. We're just going to sit here. We're going to talk about the Force, and we're going to meditate. So you can kind of see how the Jedi Council was essentially ineffective, bureaucratic, ineffective. And there were two cameos that were in the book that I appreciated for characters that we're going to see down the road. One of the cameos is you get to see Jedi Master Joruus C'baoth. He has a small conversation in the elevator or corridor with Qui-Gon Jinn. And he becomes very important down the line when we get to the Thrawn trilogy and when we get to Outbound Flight. So it's nice to see C'baoth when he was a Jedi before we get to that point. And the other cameo that we get to see is Jedi Vergere. Vergere is in this, the Fosh bird-like Jedi. And we get to see her because she actually goes on a mission with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. One of the assassination attempts. She helps them out with that. And it's nice to see her as well because she will show up when we get to the new Jedi Order. Way down the line, she's instrumental in that storyline. So it's nice to see these two characters pop up pre all of their storylines as Jedi in the temple doing Jedi things and what they were like before the events of their books show up. So I appreciate that. I thought that was a neat way to tie everything in. There were a couple of things that I didn't like that were sort of strange for me. One was in the beginning of the book, James Luceno takes a lot of time explaining things to us. Simple things like what the Jedi are, what the Force is, what lightsabers are. He does that in the very beginning. Almost as if the people who are reading this book have no idea what Star Wars is, no idea what the Jedi are, or lightsabers, or the Force, and he's explaining it to us like we're kindergartners, like we've never experienced these concepts before. And I thought that was a strange thing to do because his previous book, Plagueis, was so well written. There wasn't any of that explaining going on. But there was in this one, so it was a little jarring. It took me out of the story a little bit because if you're writing for a particular audience, you're writing specifically for a Star Wars audience, then there are things you're going to need to take for granted, that they know what Jedi are and lightsabers and the Force, and they don't need that explained to them. But we got it explained to us in that. So that was a little jarring for me. And the other thing that was I didn't so much like about the book was that it was a bit slow. Not that it was a slog. It was just a slow-paced book. There was not a lot of action going on. It was a lot of political maneuvering, a lot of talking, a lot of manipulating, but not a lot of action. And as we go through these books, you'll find that there are two types of Star Wars books in the expanded universe. There are books like Darth Plagueis that feel like Star Wars, that feel like a Star Wars story, that have that flavor, that have that feeling that this is Star Wars, and it captures all of the essence of a Star Wars story or a Star Wars movie. And then there are other books that feel like they're stories that just happen to have Star Wars characters in them. And that's what Cloak of Deception felt like to me. It felt like it was a political thriller. It was a story that just happened to have Jedi in it. It just happened to have Star Wars characters in it. Didn't have the feel of a Star Wars story like Plagueis did. So, not that I didn't enjoy it. It's just not one of my top tier Star Wars reads. And it's important to read if you're doing what we're doing, if we're going through the chronology. If you're doing that, then yes, you have to read this because it is important. It actually ends with them getting ready to do the blockade of Naboo. So it ends just about right where Phantom Menace begins. So it is important. It's just not one of my top favorite reads, and not one that I would pick off the shelf and say, hey, I want to reread this just because I want to read a Star Wars novel. So I gave it a 3 on Goodreads. I gave it a middle-of-the-road rating for what I feel is a middle-of-the-road book. But, again, if you're going in chronological order, you'll want to go through Cloak of Deception. So guys, that is my review of James Luceno's second novel prior to The Phantom Menace. And the next book on the list is Michael Reeves' Darth Maul, Shadowhunter. Ooh, another Darth Maul book. Another Darth Maul-centric book. And that is the last book that we'll read before our first novelization read, before The Phantom Menace. So guys, that is my review of Cloak of Deception. Let me know what you thought about it. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, what you did like about it, what you didn't like about it. Put it in the comments below and let's have a discussion about that. And as always, thanks for watching. Give it a thumbs up, give it a like, and a subscribe. Share it around. Tell it to your friends. Tell it to your enemies. Tell it to your Jedi friends who just want to sit in their ivory tower and think about the Force and meditate. And until next time, I will see you in the next video.